And what is up, YouTube? My name is G3Iron, and today we are going over really what people are excited to play in Path of Exile Legion 3.7. And this was a question that I asked just a day ago on the YouTube community channel, and I've been really surprised to see the response that this has gotten, and well, just basically the results of the poll and the results of where people are at and what people are excited about. So if you're new to the channel, you can go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and ding the bell for more videos just like this one. If at any point in time you would like to jump ahead or revisit any of the topics that we discussed, there are, of course, timestamps placed above my slightly balding forehead, and those are hot linked for you down below in the video description. So I wanted to see what people were excited to play in 3.7, partially selfishly, just to see, okay, what are other people excited about, and therefore what's going to be maybe meta indications, maybe leaning one way or the other before patch notes hit. And so asked this question because I typically don't play meta builds early on at the league start, if at all during leagues, because it's so often cheaper to not play meta builds. And so I asked this question, at least partially selfishly, and then also partially altruistically, so that way everybody else can also benefit from seeing, hey, what are people excited about and what are people hoping to play and excited for in 3.7. And in some ways this was shocking, and in some ways this was not. So first off, the question was, what are you most stoked to play for? And a lot of the things that people have been chatting about, whether that's on the forums, whether that's in-game, whether that's on Discord, whether that's on Twitch, whether that's on YouTube, or whether that's on Reddit, as people are talking about Path of Exile Legion, of course, almost everybody, as we're talking about Legion, yes, people are mentioning monoliths and how it's like Breach 2.0, and we're all excited for that. But really what people are excited for is the melee rework. And this is actually really interesting because we're entering a time period. I think that we can say that we've solidly entered into this time period now in Path of Exile's life cycle and growth and development as a community, where we are actually just as excited as a player base in terms of the hype that gets generated for not just the new league mechanics as they come, but for the rework of old league mechanics as they come. And this is actually interesting because it's a bit of a divergence from really where we've been as a game over the last several years, which has been focused more on new things that are getting added through new patches, through new expansions, through new mechanics introduced through leagues, rather than reworking old things. Yes, there's always been a segment of the population that is excited about reworks, but it's interesting to note that there's kind of this dichotomy, right? Because a portion of a player population that can get excited about a rework necessitates that there's enough of that population that's played the game long enough to have experienced what something used to be like, and now has a point of reference to compare it to what that newly reworked thing is like now. So if you don't have a point of reference, if you don't have a player base that has been around long enough to appreciate something in its original state or hate something in its original state, you won't necessarily have a player base that gets really excited when you announce that you're changing it or making reworks to it. And we are no longer in a stage where people don't get excited about reworks because there aren't enough people that have played Path of Exile. We're now at a point in time where a lot of people are really excited for reworks, to the extent that people are almost more excited for reworks than they are for new league mechanics entirely. Now, everyone gets excited for the league economy and for the reset and for the ladder reset. Don't hear what I'm not saying. What I am saying is that people are just as excited for skills that are being reworked, for ascendancies that are being reworked, for the passive tree that's getting reworked, as they are excited for potentially new league mechanics in and of themselves. And that's really exciting to me as a Path of Exile player to see that change in the Path of Exile community. So we asked this question, what are people excited for? And the vast majority of people are excited for a couple of things here. So one of those things being Flicker Strike. 13% folks said, I'm stoked to play Flicker Strike in 3.7. Now, you might say, okay, that's only 13%. It was about, just under 3 weeks ago-ish that the subreddit thread, specifically the subreddit thread, not the forums, not Twitch, not YouTube, but specifically the Path of Exile subreddit, for whatever reason, was just overrun with Flicker Strike memes, and people were putting Flicker Strike memes all over the place for just a couple of days. It was just like this little blip on the radar, as it were, of the timeline of the Path of Exile Legion teasers being released. And one of the quotes that came out of all of those teases was that Path of Exile Legion would be a Flickr-friendly league. We didn't even know that it was called Path of Exile Legion at that point, but they said the release from GGG was that there was confirmation that, yes, whatever the next league would be called, 3.7 would be Flickr friendly. And so a bunch of people got excited. And it's really interesting because when I was first introduced to Flickr Strike, it was actually through a friend of a friend who said, you know what? You need to make sure that at least one time in your Path of Exile existence and career, you need to play at least one Flickr Strike build. Everybody does it. It's fun. It's great. You're going to go off and hold down Flickr Strike and you're going to die. You will absolutely die, but you'll have a great time playing it. And I really didn't understand what they meant. I was just like, huh? What? I mean, sure, okay. But at that point in time, I was still just playing Path of Exile primarily as a summoner. And I was like, yeah, I enjoy playing summoners. This is what I do. And then a few leagues later, I tried out a Flickr Strike build. And he was absolutely right. Everyone should try a Flickr Strike build at least once in their Path of Exile career. And you never know. Maybe it'll grow on you and you'll play it a whole bunch. So I'm glad that so many people are excited to play Flickr Strike. And you never know. Maybe I'll feature a Flickr Strike build here or there over the next couple of weeks or couple of days and be recommending certain builds to play for Flickr Strike because it's going to be very fun this league. Second category was I'm stoked to play Cyclone. And this was interesting because I had to include both cast while channeling or cast on crit because the number of people that I have interacted with, it's been staggering. The number of people that have not remembered that cast while channeling is a thing. One of the big buffs to Cyclone this league is that it's getting the channeling tag, which allows it to be used in conjunction with cast while channeling, so you don't necessarily have to scale it up as a crit-based build. You're not dependent totally on crits in order to cast whatever spells or conjunction of spells that you are trying to cast. And so this single additional skill tag that's getting added to Cyclone itself is a massive, massive quality of life buff to anybody that wants to play a Cyclone build, regardless of whether it's cast on crit or cast while channeling. But of course, it's build enabling literally for cast while channeling. So 29% of folks are excited to play Cyclone in some way or another. And I think this is, again, personal anecdotal stuff. I like to just offer that as a disclaimer because we do talk a lot about statistics here in the G3 community. And so when I'm referencing a statistic, I like to be specific and cite sources. This is not one of those instances. This is purely anecdotal, purely my own just personal experience. The number one thing that I've heard from people coming over from other specific action RPGs, certainly some of them made by Blizzard, the number one class that people have said they're excited to play is summoning. People are excited to come from D3 to play summoning, to play summoners as a witch. Secondly, the second most popular class that I've heard from other people is to come over and play Cyclone, is to come over and replicate whatever it is that they've experienced either in Diablo 2 or Diablo 3, that barbarian-esque, whirlwind-esque, twirling, whirling ball of death that is playing essentially a Cyclone build. And so it's fascinating to me that this is indeed 3.7. The melee rework. Legion League is melee friendly. This is going to be the time, if there's ever been a time in Path of Exile's history to play Cyclone, now is going to be the time. And sure enough, almost 30% of folks who voted on this are stoked to play Cyclone. The third group of people are people who are stoked to play melee other than Flickr or Cyclone. And this group is huge. It's not quite as big as the two groups of Flickr plus Cyclone combined, but it is nonetheless a big group. It's nearly 40% of people who voted on the poll are going to be playing something that's melee other than Flickr or Cyclone. Now, I've had a couple of folks in Guild ask me what I'm going to be playing. I've had a couple of folks ask me for specific melee recommendations. I've got to just say this at this point, while we're waiting for patch notes. Patch notes when, right? That's a universal community meme for all of us who are Path of Exile players. Hey, when are the patch notes coming? We all know when the patch notes are actually coming. Bex has actually told us on Twitter. We've all seen it on Discord. We've all seen it posted, plastered everywhere. We actually have the schedule for when patch notes are coming. But nonetheless, it's a meme. We'll ask when patch notes are coming. When the patch notes come out, that's when we'll all have a better indication of what sort of builds and what sort of changes there are to present builds. That being said, because this is a melee rework, we may have numeric values and numeric changes for how things are going to scale. we won't actually have a feel for what these builds feel like playing until everybody actually gets in once Legion League drops. And the reason for that is because of animation canceling, as well as so many other little quality of life changes that are coming with Path of Exile Legion. So it's fascinating to me that so many people want builds. I get it, but there's no way to give you early access to like what build is going to be a good build or what suggestion is going to be a good suggestion, because at this point we all have the same amount of information. That being said, the number of people here who are stoked to play something other than Cyclone and other than Flicker Strike, that's a really high number of people who are getting excited for melee skills that basically have had nothing teased. I want to stress that. Flicker Strike, we've had official communication, right, where GGG has said, hey, this is going to be a Flicker Strike friendly league. Cyclone, we've seen it in the Path of Exile Legion trailer that Cyclone is being showed off all over the place as this gorgeous, beautiful, exciting, fun playstyle to play with. Other melee stuff, we're talking Earthquake, we're talking Cleave, we're talking Reeve, we're talking Lacerate, we're talking Glacial Hammer, we're talking Molten Strike, we're talking about Ground Slam, which, yes, we saw a little bit of that in the trailer. Like, we're talking about, what is it? Is it Ice Shatter? Shattering Ice? No. Shattering Steel. That's what I'm thinking of. The Impale skills and Lancing Steel, right? What are these other melee skills going to feel like and be like? Double Strike. What's Double Strike going to be like? We have relatively like next to no information, just little tiny snippets on a 3-minute YouTube clip. Like, that's what we've got. If you go and you search around on the various different media outlets that have covered Path of Exile Legion, they're basically doing the same thing, where they're taking that same 3-minute video and maybe they're squeezing different things out of it. But that's pretty much what we've got at this point. So I am excited. I'm stoked for those other changes to melee skills, particularly Earthquake. Earthquake was an early hardcore melee skill that I used that took me very, very far, and it was successful back in the day when I was playing hardcore and swapped over from playing a summoner to playing melee. So that's one of the things that I'm excited for. But I'm very excited to see what the changes are to other skills. And I'm also excited to see that people are just generally excited to play melee. Like, regardless of what is going to come out, even without having numbers and patch notes, people are still getting excited to play melee simply because there's a portion of the population that wants to play melee and wants to play other than Flicker or Cyclone. That's really exciting, and I think it's indicative of where we're at, again, as a Path of Exile community, as we're getting excited and potentially more excited for reworks than we get excited for new league mechanics. I think that's fun. I think it's exciting. And yes, I may or may not be showing off a Glacial Hammer build at some point. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, the fourth category was what's melee? Not going to touch it in 3.7, which this was 18% of the people who voted on this poll. That's amazing. 18%. So when you think about it this way, rather than saying 18% are going to play something other than melee, look at it from the reverse angle. 82% of people who participated in this G3 community poll are going to be playing melee. So, those of you that have asked me questions on Discord or on YouTube, or you've sent me an email or a text, if you're asking questions, hey, what's going to be the meta? Melee's going to be the meta, folks. Duh, right? On top of that, what's going to be the meta? Cyclone, Flicker Strike. Those two skills legitimately may make up, at least for the opening weekend, the vast majority of the players, and probably the ascendancies as well. The vast majority of ascendancies that people are going to be playing are going to be ascendancies that are tied to, or at least playable in conjunction with, either Cyclone or Flicker Strike. Beyond that, probably the bigger, this is tough, but probably the bigger sorts of melee builds that are going to be exciting outside of that are probably going to be Old Faithful skills. The risk in saying that right now is that some of our Old Faithful skills, like Molten Strike, have been very, very strong for a very, very long time. And so it could be that they're simply going to get rotated out and get slapped with the Nerf hammer during patch notes. We don't know. Molten Strike has been very, very solid in the midst of melee needing rework for the last several leagues, and yet Molten Strike is still coming out at the top for whether or not you're bossing, whether or not you're delving, whether or not you just want big DPS numbers, whether or not even you're map clearing as a melee. oftentimes Molten Strike has come out at the top end of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it gets nerfed. If it doesn't get nerfed, though, with all of this other quality of life stuff that's coming in, I would actually expect Molten Strike to be up there. I would also expect actually a skill like Lacerate, something that has got some level of skill to it, where Lacerate, depending on where you position your character, it can actually deal more damage because you can double hit with your cones that you shoot out. And by shoot out, I don't mean actually shoot. It's not a projectile, but it acts that way as a cone as it leaves from your character. And we've been told that there is going to be some more accuracy in the coning of your actual AoE on melee hits that hit around your character, that it's not a true AoE hit, that it's actually coning, that your auto attack comes out in the shape of a triangle and splits off of your character. That's fascinating to me. And what we may actually see is top racers and top streamers and top competitive players in PoE actually use skills like that allow them to learn the mechanics of the skill, and then in conjunction with animation canceling, actually take advantage of that to really scale the damage up, because potentially, like a skill like Blade Flurry, a melee skill, depending on your level of skill as a player with the particular usage of Blade Flurry and knowing how long to channel it for and when to release it and when's the best damage to be dealt during a particular boss fight or a particular monster encounter, those are all variables that are learnable variables by players. And so I fully expect racers and the competitive side and the competitive part of the community here in Path of Exile to learn which of those melee skills are most broken, most OP, most abusable in terms of taking advantage of their damage and really kicking out the best quality of life. So I'm excited to see something like Lacerate as it comes out, and how it can potentially be a game changer depending on your skill in using that particular skill, as opposed to something like Ground Slam, which is just, hey, it's going to cone and hit everything in front of you. So there are some differences there that I'm excited for. Okay, a couple of these comments that I wanted to get to, because these are great comments that have been left. So first off, Max Zay actually said, Cyclone Summoner with Herald of Agony, it's already completely broken, waiting for the patch notes. You're absolutely right on that. We actually showed a version of that build a while ago on the channel, and my hope is just that Herald of Agony doesn't get nerfed, because it could. I think that in some ways, Herald of Agony has been so safe as a league starter. It's kind of in that danger zone. Not to the extent that Winter Orb was, where Winter Orb, everybody was playing it. We all knew that there would be adjustments that were coming. But Herald of Agony is in a spot where it scales ridiculously with investment, and you can also play it on a starter budget. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get nerfed, but it could mean that that is something up on the chopping block, especially if Grinding Gear Games decides that they want to rework summoners as well as minions later on down the road, potentially in 3.8 or 3.9. So it could see a numeric tweak. Okay, another quote that I wanted to get to was from Pol Pot, which was, I just hope they give Slayer a fat rework. That's going to happen. Okay, so just a brief note of this in the scheduling. Typically, the most exciting and excitable ascendancies that people are really stoked for to see, the things that we all really want to get excited for and see, are the things that they hold the last that they tease out at the end of tease season, as it were, right before patch notes come out. And so I think it's pretty safe to say that Slayer is going to get a big rework, and it'll probably change, as well as Berserker. I think those two are going to get the big changes and be the two big most weighted on, because when you look statistically at some of the less played or least played ascendancies across the board, whether it was SSF, whether it was Trade League, whether it was Hardcore, whether it was Softcore, back in Synthesis, I think those particular ascendancies that were at the back end of players wanting to play them are now going to be at the front end of players hyped up and excited for the changes that are coming. Okay, one last quote right here is from Rage Wolf, who says, I have no idea what melee skill I'll use, would like to check out the new ones, otherwise probably something like Tectonic Slam, but I'll make a Berserker with Kongor's Undying Rage for that sweet permanent onslaught plus rage, making you go at light speed. So we don't have confirmation yet, as of yet, whether or not Rage is going to be a mechanic that extends beyond the Berserker. I will just say this. There are not many, there may be a few that still exist, but there are not many specific UI features and UI designs that are specific for an ascendancy that apply across all of Path of Exile UI. And since they showed us that the rage meter is now a meter that goes above mana, it could be that that's something that's still just restricted for Berserkers, but it could also be that it's something that's actually extendable and playable beyond just the Berserker class. So we'll see what that looks like, and we'll see what is yet to come with all of the various patch notes as well as teasers as we all count down the days until Path of Exile Legion is released. Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment down below about what you're most excited to play in Path of Exile League and Path of Exile Legion League. Are you most excited to play Flicker Strike? Are you going to play Flicker Strike at any point in Path of Exile Legion? Are you going to play Cyclone? Are you going to league start Cyclone? I think everybody and their brother is going to be excited to play Cyclone. Like, basically, I think on launch day, it'll be 50-50. I think people are either going to be playing Cyclone or they're going to be playing some other melee skill. And there's going to be like a sliver of us, that 18% of how many of us aren't going to touch melee, supposedly. I think that number goes down the closer and closer we get to Legion and the more hype gets generated about melee. If you're not going to play Flicker Strike or Cyclone, what skill are you excited to play as a melee character? And those of you that are just absolutely filthy necromancers, summoners, spellcasters like myself, who generally play melee occasionally, but you mostly play other stuff, what are you going to be playing as you are anticipating Path of Exile Legion 3.7's arrival? Really doesn't matter what we say right now because, you know, once patch notes come out, we're all going to change anyway, right? I hope that this league is the league A Mirror of Calandra drops for you.
Nice patrons, yes, good patrons. They're so kind and supportive.
I can't believe you watched that thing. That was good job. You did it. You got through the whole video. Yay.